Threads FreePBX module video number 2, configuring profiles to control call transcription. When you first install the Threads FreePBX module, we create 3 profiles. A profile is a set of configuration around calls being recorded or not recorded and transcribed and so on. So working from the bottom up, the first profile is called exclude in threads. This will not record calls, not transcribe calls, not send an email with the transcription. The next one up is send to threads but do not transcribe, which is fairly clear. So the calls are sent to the thread service but are not transcribed. And this profile is the default. So I'm going to write a D next to that one to indicate this is the default profile. And then at the top we have the trial profile, which will send the calls to threads, transcribe the calls, and send both a recording of the call and a transcription in a document via email. So each of these profiles has a different configuration and you can configure them how you wish. Now, over here on the right hand side, we have got your extensions, your groups that you have configured in FreePBX, and also external numbers. So extensions, of which you will probably have many, they will all by default be attached to the default send to threads but do not transcribe. So when you install the FreePBX module, all of your extensions will be attached to this profile. But if you decide one of these extensions in particular you want to test with, then you can instead attach that one to the trial profile, and then that extension will have its calls recorded and transcribed, etc. The same goes for groups. So if you have a main ring group and you decide that you want to have all of the calls transcribed, then you could attach a group to the relevant threads profile, and then that profile settings will act upon that group. And the same for external numbers. So if there's a particular number 0777XYZ that you want to transcribe calls for, then you can connect that number up to the relevant profile that handles the calls in the way that you wish. As well as attaching extensions and groups and numbers to profiles, you also get to configure the profiles, plus you can create new profiles if you want to yourself. And when you look at the settings within a profile, you'll find that there are 3 tabs. One that determines how inbound calls are handled, one for outbound calls, and a third for external calls. So for each of these categories, you can determine whether calls are recorded, whether they're transcribed, and when they are transcribed, how the transcriptions are handled, for example, sending of an audio file via email or also sending a Word document containing the transcription. Let's go look at the FreePBX module configuration in the browser. So here we are in our FreePBX administration. We've installed and done the basic configuration of the Threads module. Next, I want to focus on the settings menu and the Threads client profiles, as we've just been looking at on the whiteboard. So in here you can see those 3 profiles: Threads trial, send to threads but do not transcribe, exclude in threads. And for each of these profiles we can go in and edit it, and the editing will allow us to determine for the 3 tabs at the bottom here how we behave for inbound, outbound and internal call handling. So at the top of the configuration for the profile, it has a name. This one is not the default, but we could set it to be the default. There's only one profile that can be the default. And then there's a automatic speech recognition engine selected. So we work with a bunch of different ASR engines. Speechmatics is our default, but you'll be able to select other engines as time goes by. And then down at the bottom of the window, we can configure the call handling for the 3 different categories: in, out and internal call handling. So for each of these, we can determine whether or not the call is entirely excluded, which means it's not recorded at all. So the setting no here means that the call is recorded, and then determine whether or not the call is transcribed. There are time settings that let you avoid transcribing very short calls or very long calls. The defaults in here might be fine for you, but you probably need to set those up. You can choose your own units here for each of those two measurements. And then at the bottom, you can determine whether or not the email is sent to the email address defined on the extension, or you can override that with a custom email. And then you can choose whether or not the email that we send should include an MP3 audio file and/or a Word document containing the transcription. And finally, the private setting will mark the call as private within the Threads Intelligent Message Hub web interface. And you can see I just hovered over the question mark button, which is available for all of these options, so it's very clear to see what each one of them does. So you set up these options for inbound, outbound and internal call handling, and then that comprises the settings for our profile. And the middle one here, send to threads but do not transcribe, is currently the default. If I go to edit this one, you can see that this one is set to be the default profile. So to not have that be the default anymore, I would have to promote one of the other ones to be the default. And the deal with the default is that your existing extensions will attach themselves to this profile when you install the plugin. So you can see the default here has 10 members, which means in our case there are 10 extensions attached to it. If I go to the membership tab here, I can see the 10 extensions set up on my PBX, and you can see for each of them we list the extension number and then we say which profile it's attached to. And if I took Layla here, I could go edit her and attach her to the Threads trial profile, and then that would mean that the settings within that profile will act upon that extension, which means that we will get transcriptions for Layla's calls. If I want to attach a number of users to a different profile, I can do that by selecting those users in here, choosing the profile and then clicking on assign to selected profile and confirming. And then you can see we now have 5 of our 10 extensions in the Threads trial profile, so they'll be getting transcriptions emailed to them. For each of these membership entries, we can click on the actions button on the far right hand side. If I do that for Layla, then if Layla doesn't have an email address defined in her extension, or if that isn't the address that she really wants the emails to be sent to, we can override that by choosing a different email address in here. And then, as you can see in the tooltip, the description tells us that the email address that you enter here will override the one set in the extension if there is one, and that you should leave this field empty to use the email address set in the extension. And it's also possible to use commas to enter multiple email addresses in here. I won't save that change. The Add New Member button over here on the left-hand side allows us to provide either an external number or the ID of a queue to attach either one of those items to a profile. So, for example, I could take an external mobile number and I could attach that to the Threads trial queue. I could also provide an email address for those emails to be delivered to, and now I have an 11th item. So let me list all 11 items, and now you can see that the external number is attached to the Threads trial profile. And you can do the same thing to attach a group that might have a 1001 ID, and I could also attach that to the Threads trial. You'll notice if I don't enter an email because there is one needed or a list of emails to deliver the transcriptions to, then I should enter an email address in here, and then I can add that one to the list as well. Another thing you may need to do from time to time is go into Threads client contexts here, where it might be necessary for you to configure an unknown context. A context is where a call initially lands when it's started. Threads knows about most of the contexts, like the ones that you can see here, that are used as standard in FreePBX, but you're able to create your own, or a module that you're using may create them. When Threads sees a call starting with a context that it has never seen before, it will create it in this list, but it'll set it to unknown, as well as sending an email to your Threads administrator to let them know. When this happens, you'll need to go to settings to get to the Threads context list that you can see here, find the context, edit it, and set it to one of ignore, meaning you have no need for this context in Threads call transcription. Internal to flag it in Threads as an internal call, external to flag it as an external call, or Sangoma Connect if this is a new context that the Sangoma Connect module is handling. Okay, that wraps it up for this video. Thanks for watching.